But in terms of the basic social organization and the basic human values that are represented, hunter-gatherer cultures are remarkably similar. And another name for these banned hunter-gatherer cultures that anthropologists regularly use in their writings is egalitarian cultures. These are by far the most egalitarian peoples that have ever been found on Earth, people living in these hunter-gatherer cultures. We mustn't mix up these cultures with so-called tribal cultures, which can be fierce, where you have chiefs or big men, and you have a kind of hierarchical structure, and you can have violence and so on and so forth. Those are really not hunter-gatherer cultures. Those are post-agricultural cultures, which may involve some hunting and gathering. But hunter-gatherers, banned hunter-gatherers, to be clear, do not have big men, they do not have chiefs, they do not have a hierarchical structure within their culture. They're not totally, I can't say that violence is totally absent from them. They're human beings. They get enraged sometimes and violence does occur. But unlike many of the agricultural cultures that follow them, they never condone violence. They never accept violence as a normal thing. They would never praise somebody for killing somebody because that person molested their wife or whatever it is. They would never condone violence. They would never condone the back and forth violence that becomes part of tribal life in many other cultures post-hunter-gatherer. They live in small bands of maybe 20 to 50 people per band, counting children, and they're mobile. They move around from place to place, from sort of campsite to follow the available game and vegetation. And because they're mobile, because they don't have permanent homes, they don't accumulate property. Property would be a burden if you owned more than what you could carry with you. And that certainly feeds into their being egalitarian. There's no sense in owning any more than anything else. They survive because they are so skilled at cooperation and sharing. Their entire lifestyle depends upon cooperation. They hunt cooperatively. If one person is successful in killing a large game, they have to share it with others, and that's the assurance against the fact that they may not get any game for a long time after that. Your insurance against death really depends upon your cooperation with others in the band, and they even cooperate across bands if one band is more needy than another. So as part of their strong egalitarian culture, they have also an extraordinary degree of respect for individual autonomy. They are so much opposed to the idea of hierarchy, to the idea that anybody is somebody else's boss, that according to the anthropologists I talked to and according to the writing of the anthropologists, they do not tell one another what to do. They take pains not to tell one another what to do. They think it would be wrong, it would be arrogant. If I believe that I'm a better hunter than you are and I tell you how you should hunt, I would be regarded as being arrogant. Maybe you would ask me for some advice, and then maybe I would in some humble way give you some thoughts about it from my perspective. But if I were to impose my thoughts about it upon you, that would be acting like a big shot. People would start to make fun of me for doing that. They would say, oh, you think you're such a big shot, that you think you're a better hunter than everybody else. Now, what's really remarkable, and almost I couldn't believe it at first, I thought I was hearing from people who were presenting me with biased points of view, but when I heard it from all of these anthropologists, and I read it wherever I read it, the remarkable thing is they applied this to children. They don't tell children what to do. They don't tell children what to do. So that is, that's the first point about this. If these cultures that survived as modern hunter-gatherer cultures in various parts of the world, if these represent in this kind of way the way human beings existed throughout time until agriculture, this means that throughout most of human history, children were growing up without adults telling them what to do. And that's something that's hard for us in our culture today to get our heads around. So, but let me, so one of my conclusions, the first and maybe most important conclusion from this looking into hunter-gatherer cultures, is that children in these cultures are trusted. They're trusted in a way that's hard for us to imagine. Their instincts are trusted. Their logic is trusted. Their willfulness is trusted. Parents don't see parenting as a battle of will, where they have to somehow overcome the will of the child. The child's will is what reigns in terms of the child's behavior. Let me just read a few quotations that give you kind of a flavor of the way different anthropologists talked about this. So here's one. This happens to be an anthropologist named Yumi Goso, who's writing an article about hunter-gatherer cultures in general, but she herself studies a group in South America called the Paracana. So she wrote, hunter-gatherers do not give orders to their children. For example, no adult announces bedtime at night. Children remain around adults until they feel tired and fall asleep. Adults do not interfere with their children's lives. They never beat, scold, or behave aggressively with them, physically or verbally, nor do they offer praise or keep track of their development. Let me read that last part again. Nor do they offer praise or keep track of their development. They just trust that things are going to come out okay. You know, this business of not hitting a child, one other anthropologist told me that in the group that he studied, there were three really important prohibitions, the worst things that a person can do. One is murder, one is incest, and another is hitting a child. These are the things, these are the taboos, he says, in the culture that he was studying. Here's another quotation. The idea that this is my child or your child does not exist. Deciding what another person should do, no matter what his age, is outside the Iguana vocabulary of behavior. This happens to be another South American group. There is great interest in what everyone does, but no impulse to influence, let alone coerce anyone. The child's will is his motive force. This is the kind of thing that I heard really about all of these cultures. And here's one more. This one happens to be somebody who studied a group of Inuit in the Hudson Bay area. Infants and young children are allowed to explore their environments to the limits of their physical capacities and with minimal interference with from adults. Thus, if a child picks up a hazardous object, parents generally leave it to explore the dangers on its own. The child is presumed to know what it is doing. So I have a friend, actually a colleague at Boston College, Gilda Morelli is her name, who in the 1980s and to some degree 90s lived among a group of hunter-gatherers in Central Africa called the Efe. And she was actually the person who initially got me interested in hunter-gatherers and got me to think that it would be fascinating to learn more about them. But she showed me slides that she had of little toddlers, 2-year-olds playing with machetes, playing with fire, adults sitting back, not paying any attention to this. And I asked her, do the children sometimes hurt themselves? And she said, yes. You know, they sometimes cut themselves. They sometimes burn themselves. Most people have some scars from when they were children playing in this kind of way. But they don't kill themselves. They don't mortally injure themselves in this way. And I said, well, why do the parents let them do it? And she said, well, what they would say is, how else are they going to learn? How else are they going to learn if they don't play? It's very important that children in hunter-gatherer culture learn how to use these things. Fire, these are the main tools of the culture. And the earlier they start to use them, the more these are going to be kind of natural extensions of their body. That machete, those knives and those digging sticks and the bows and arrows, the fire that they're playing with, these almost have to be extensions of their body. Well, if they start playing with the nobody's telling the 2-year-olds to do it. They're just doing it, right? But they're not stopping the 2-year-olds. And the reason they're not stopping the 2-year-olds is because they believe this is what 2-year-olds do. They're doing it for a good reason. And that reason maybe is that they will then become much better at using these tools because they started while they were still very, very young using them.